Hi, my name is Jennifer Steck. Thank you for joining me today to discuss the larger room beyond the Charlotte Mason homeschool years. I have been a Charlotte Mason educator for over 10 years. I currently live in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm a member and actually the founder of Overstone School, which is a cooperative school, Charlotte Mason Cooperative School in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And I have just graduated my firstborn, a daughter, and then I have two coming up behind her. But right now I also teach and advise in middle and upper school and talk to a lot of parents about their questions on counting credits in a Charlotte Mason high school, and then also applying to schools and kind of what exists beyond home education in terms of trade schools, two-year schools, four-year colleges and universities. So I thought I actually put together this presentation for a retreat that I attended in June of 2019, and I have modified it somewhat to hopefully be not Kentucky specific, but more general, so that no matter where you are and watching this, it can apply to you. So I hope it's helpful. I'm going to develop a complimentary tutorial on how to develop a Charlotte Mason transcript and really go into more depth on how to calculate credits and how to make your transcript look as professional and user-friendly as possible to the admissions representatives that you may be submitting it to. So again, thank you for joining me, and let's get started. Well, I don't want to start this presentation without addressing the parents of younger children who might not quite be at the middle or high school years, but are really laying that foundation. And by that, I mean just establishing excellent habits, really working on consistency of habits, reading wonderful books, laying out this feast. And in the archives, there exists an article, or actually it's not really an article, it was a handwritten piece that Charlotte Mason wrote, and it was transcribed, but I haven't really seen it published very broadly. But I thought it was just such a beautiful description of what parents of young children are doing at this point in their lives. So I wanted to include that here at the beginning of the presentation to encourage you to keep going, even when it is difficult, that it is worth it. This philosophy of education bears so much fruit, and I am so very grateful that it was introduced to me so long ago. So Mason says, "Truly, except the Lord build the house, they labor but in vain that build it. When the Lord builds, they labor also, but not in vain. Where is the promise for the edifying of the sober and righteous and godly Christian character, except as we shall labor, laying brick upon brick? We may well believe that in this manner the Lord and giver of life himself graciously undertakes the office of parent to every willing and obedient soul. But here is where the privilege and the responsibility of the human parent comes in. During the weak and tender years of the child, the laying of brick to brick falls to the parent, the foundation and the lowermost rounds of the building upon whose stability the safety of the whole depends. It rests with the parent to initiate goodness, as it were, to lay such habits of well-doing and well-being as are fit to support a building of God and able to bear the weight of the superstructure. Parents labor at the very groundwork, the foundations of the men and women that shall be. And though the divine grace is well able to beautify the mean and add strength to the tottering, nevertheless experience supports the record, that to him that hath shall be given, that strength shall be added to strength, and grace to beauty. Therefore it behooves parents to study the principles of this divine architecture, which is their vocation. No random, purposeless heaping of stone upon stone will do here." So parents, keep laboring at the groundwork. Keep studying Mason's principles, and I think that you will find that when your children are done with their education, no matter what they do, that they will have had their feet set in that large room and they will be lifelong learners. So let's move on and talk about what parents can do while they are laying that groundwork and preparing for the high school year. So what do we do before and during the middle school years? Well, continue to lay out the feast. Don't do your best not to fall into that temptation of only focusing on science or reading and math, and to the exclusion of things like nature study and artist study, composer study, and drill. We want to lay out that feast because it's quite remarkable that our children are often interested in things that we never thought we'd be interested in ourselves, or that we may have thought, I had never thought I would have a child interested in that. But if we're not laying out that feast, then their interest is not being piqued perhaps in what might be their gifting. Another thing you should do before and during the middle school years is to focus on written narration and composition skills. Mason, in her volumes, lays out a number of narration prompts and composition prompts, and I have seen how important it is now that my daughter has graduated, but especially while she was taking dual enrollment classes, they were very, very heavy on writing. And in fact, one of her professors said, please narrate each chapter in this book. And I thought, my goodness, he sounds like Charlotte Mason. But focusing on the written skills will really pay dividends as they are building this habit over the years. I would encourage you to add extracurricular activities as you can, as long as you're keeping your life balanced. These extracurricular activities, as we will see, can provide the basis, especially when they're done for many years, for the ability to talk about a specific skill to a recruiter, or to write about it for a college application. So if you find that your child has a bent towards something and you'd like to encourage that, I definitely encourage you to find a couple of things that your child may be interested in and really develop those skills into high school. In your later middle school years, so for example, 8th grade, especially, consider if one or more of your subjects could be high school level. We'll talk about this again in a few minutes, but for example, if you have a bilingual household, you may be able to not only study English, but you may also be able to study a second language, the grammar, the reading, the writing in that second language. And that absolutely can be counted as a high school credit. So consider that in 8th grade, your child may have done enough work to achieve a high school credit in, let's say, a second language or a particular instrument, for example. So I have a list of extracurricular ideas, and for those who are listening to this presentation as opposed to reading it, I'm going to just quickly read down these. Youth orchestra, art society, dance, team or individual sports, service organizations, church and mission work, scouting, theater, political campaigns, a governor's scholar program for your state, a governor's school for the arts, I govern, perhaps being a state page, science fairs, natural history clubs, 4-H, FFA, collaborative environments, employment and internships, speech and debate, and summer camps. And I know that I've missed many things and that the list could go on, but these are just some ideas of things your child may be interested in pursuing in an extracurricular activity. Now, when it comes to drafting a 4-year plan, let's say that your child is in the 7th or 8th grade, please do not think that it's just this great burden on your back, because really, I think you're going to find it is your child is probably going to have so many credits. You won't have any trouble achieving the minimum number of credits for your state. We certainly did not, because again, the opportunities with home education and the feast that's laid out in a Charlotte Mason home is just so broad. So please don't look at it as a burden, but rather as just this exciting time of reflecting on what is to come for your child and reflecting on what has already been accomplished in your home. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my presentation, but hopefully here we go. So, when you're drafting a four-year plan for school, you may have an option, and I put a little asterisk here because in Kentucky, we have an option to use state requirements as a base, or we can create our own base because we're considered private schools in the state of Kentucky, or we could look at a target school, a school that our child may be interested in, and use their requirements as a base. And I think you will see that as you look at the minimum requirements for credits at different schools, you might find that there is a difference. Of course, there will probably be a difference between a two-year school and a four-year school in terms of their minimum requirements, but also a difference between private or public universities or state universities. And by differences, I mean some schools may not have a foreign language requirement, for example, and some may. Some may require that you have a certain amount of technology credits or elective credits, and some, if they are schools that are very well known, let's say for a science program, may have a greater number of science credits that they're looking for in an applicant. So make sure to go look at your state requirements first, and then think about how are we going to achieve these credits. So some people may choose to home educate or may have no options outside of the home and will achieve all credits in the home. Some may have a co-op that they belong to and might be able to achieve credits in the co-op as well as home. There's also dual enrollment opportunities, and dual enrollment opportunities don't just have to be local or even within the state. There are many universities that offer dual enrollment programs where your child can log in online, take the entire class online for usually a greatly reduced price. With the dual enrollment program, because remember, a lot of colleges and universities are introducing dual enrollment programs in order to get their foot in your door, to try to make a good impression on your child and hope that that dual enrollment might end up in an admission or in an application from your child into their school. So don't just look local for dual enrollment classes. If your child is interested in going out of state, see if they have a dual enrollment program. Another option might be testing out. There are AP tests that your child in most states are eligible to take. CLEP testing, that's another testing out option. But no matter what kind of testing you do, you want to look at your target schools and even call them. Go ahead and establish that relationship with admissions. Go ahead and establish a relationship with the department of the subject area your child might be interested in pursuing or majoring in, and ask them what are the minimum requirements for test scores if you are taking AP or CLEP or other kind of tests. So go ahead, and this 8th grade is a great time to do this kind of research, and especially a great time to go ahead and establish a connection with the admissions department. You also want to, at this point, consider how your extracurriculars are enhancing your transcript and providing a basis for those college essays, as I mentioned earlier. If you have been involved with 4-H since you were in the 3rd grade and you end up with 4-H in your senior year, and you have spent 9 years developing in their programs, perhaps leading in their programs, going to a state or national event with those programs, that is just excellent material for a college interview or for a college essay, and they are looking for what makes your child unique. So definitely this is a really good time to say, okay, maybe my child is involved in 8 things, and maybe we need to hone it down to 4 or 2 things that we're really going to focus on. So that would just be my personal recommendation in how to look at your extracurriculars and how they enhance your transcript. Now, in terms of awarding credits, in a Charlotte Mason school, as I mentioned, there is a cumulative learning aspect. So I've already mentioned foreign language, but because we are able to home educate, we often have opportunities to help our children develop skills over a long period of time that, even though they may not have been intensive for 1 year, they have been so cumulative that they can count as a credit. So an example of this might be voice or an instrument. My daughter took classical guitar for 9 years. She learned theory. She did performance. And so I absolutely counted that as a credit on her high school transcript. You may also consider all of the composer study that you have done, all of the picture study that you have done as art appreciation or music appreciation. So don't think that you have to squeeze all of that learning into 1 year to be able to count that credit. I know that there are some curriculums that split out science, and they do a trimester of biology, a trimester of physics, and a trimester of chemistry, and they do that for 4 years. So again, you're going to have that cumulative learning aspect there as well. So my next recommendation is to keep portfolios of work, of student work, whether writing or artistic or scientific, including labs, musical or other academic work, especially if your child is applying to a school that requires samples. And so, for example, if your child really wants to be a geologist and is going to apply to one of the top geology schools in your region or perhaps even in the country, there might be a very competitive process for applicants. Or if there's not as competitive a process for application, there may be a very competitive process for scholarships. And so keeping portfolios of work, showing that school or that department that your student has been very intentional about learning in a particular subject area and wants to continue to do that in a university environment can be very, very impressive. So keep those portfolios of your students' work. And be prepared to demonstrate the breadth and depth of each subject. And so again, this is not only written work, but it is labs and field experiences, perhaps trips, or organizations that your child has been involved in. Now, when it comes to keeping a transcript, I have put one that I've found on the internet, but I have one that I've developed specifically for my child and for our high school students at our cooperative, that I am, like I said, I'm going to develop another presentation and go through exactly how to take the template, and it will automatically calculate your cumulative GPA and your total credits, etc. But I have a couple of recommendations for when you are looking at putting together your transcript. First of all, start with your first credit eligible class, no matter the year. Now, I mean, we're not talking about a credit eligible class in the 5th grade, but most students, at least in our cooperative and in this area, tend to be able to count credits starting in about 8th grade. Now, it could be a little bit earlier. Sometimes it just depends on the state, and when the state allows you to count credits, but here we typically do it in the 8th grade. Keep a book list for each class and major projects or papers. So what I do is I usually have a transcript in one tab of my spreadsheet, and then the second tab or the third tab of my spreadsheet might be the book list for each one of the classes that's on the transcript, just so that I don't forget. And again, the earlier you begin to do this and make it a habit, the easier it's going to be. So you're not going to be in the senior year thinking, I cannot remember what my child did in the 9th grade. Now, I would suggest that your transcript fit onto one page. It absolutely can, and it would include the name and address of the student and parents, the school name or names, including your home, your co-op, perhaps a dual enrollment university or college, your SAT, ACT test scores. I think there's another test that has come out lately called the CLT. You may be able to add subject test scores if that's something your school is looking for. AP or CLEP scores, a GPA, both an annual and cumulative, and you want to include your dual enrollment grades in your GPA. Let's see, credits, again, annual and cumulative, and also include your dual enrollment credits, because those normally would count not only for 2, 3, maybe even 4 college credits, but 1 high school credit as well. And then you want to include your grading scale, both the numeric and alpha. And I say this because a lot of schools are wanting to know, what was an A for your co-op, or what was an A for your dual enrollment university? Was it 90 to 100, or was it much more challenging, 94 to 100? So you want to include that. An expected graduation date, and then it's typical to have signatures, whether it's of a parent and the child, or both parents, or whoever the academic provider was. Now, when it comes to financial considerations and going to school, I think I have a little hiccup in my presentation again. Here we go. A dual enrollment program is a great way to offset costs before you enter a 2 or 4 year school. Another way is a 2-year degree program, then transferring into a 4-year school. So I cannot recommend enough dual enrollment programs as a way to really expose your child to college level work, perhaps to classes that you may not be able to offer at home, but also just as an excellent way to build college credits while also getting high school credits and save money, because a lot of these dual enrollment programs are between 50 and 80% off of the regular tuition rate. Another, obviously another opportunity to save money on school would be scholarships and grants. Now, in states that have state lottery money or have specific education money set aside for their state's students, they often will give the money in terms of a public school student based on a GPA. But what I have found, and this is the case in Kentucky, for example, is that it is for a homeschooled student, our children are not eligible for state money based on GPA. And that is probably because then we could say, hey, of course my kid has a 4.0, and maybe some people do. But our money is awarded for homeschooled students based on test score. And in Kentucky, it is the ACT, but in some states it may be the SAT. So look to see if your state has any lottery money or any other money that is set aside for homeschool students. Be aware that some schools do not accept state or federal money. This, I know that there's a school in Michigan, Pennsylvania, one here in Kentucky that does not accept state or federal money. So even if we are absolutely eligible for Kentucky lottery money, they do not accept it. Now, I see this more at private and sometimes private and Christian universities, but just be aware of this. And you'll always want to ask, do you accept money from state and federal funds? The next thing that I recommend is for you to fill out the free application for student aid, for financial aid, or the College Board profile, which is another type of financial aid application, as soon as it opens. Now, the free application, the FAFSA, it's free, obviously, to fill out, but the College Board profile is not. It's around, I think, $20. But what we did was we contacted the schools at which our daughter was applying, and we said, do you have any codes that we can use to fill this College Board profile out for free? And they're like, absolutely we do. So ask to see if you can deflect that cost. And also, for that matter, while you're applying to schools, see if they have particular months when their admissions is, when it costs nothing, when it's free, or if they have a code to apply to their school. And you might save some money that way as well. All right. Still having another problem with my computer here. Sorry about that. Okay, another thing to do is to pursue employment-related scholarships. This can be an absolute godsend if your child is employed at a location that will offer money for school or money for good grades. So definitely ask your child's employer if they offer any scholarship money. And just be aware that many, many times, in fact, every time so far that we have applied for a scholarship, and we applied for an ELS scholarship and a law enforcement scholarship, it said homeschooled applicants are evaluated based on test scores alone, not GPA. So that's life. and I would definitely home educate all over again, even though that is the case. But I do want to let you know that often it is based on test score. Now, a couple of more comments about dual enrollment. It is, as I said, offered by a variety of public and private schools in your state, nationwide. You want to first look at the schools in which you're interested to see if they have those programs. Most of them do require an application, and in some cases an ACT or an SAT score and a transcript. And it's kind of similar to the college application process in that their deadline for applying to the dual enrollment program is going to be in the spring before the fall when their classes actually begin. So you want to time that so that you have your test scores done, you have your transcript ready to make that application in the spring of the year before, or the spring of the year that you want to take those fall or even summer classes. And all it will take is just getting in touch with the dual enrollment program representative or looking at the website to find out more information on their application dates. But don't waste your time and money. And what I mean by this is when you're going to take a dual enrollment class, you want to look up the transferability of that course. Let's say that you have a child that takes Introduction to Old Testament at a local university, and it could be an amazing course and such a blessing to their lives, but then they decide to go to a public or state university. Well, that public or state university may not accept that course. So you've spent that money, your child has spent that time. They do have a high school credit to show for it, but they can't transfer the 3 college credits into another school. So you always want to look at the class your child is going to take and ask yourself, if this doesn't transfer, am I going to be okay with it? Or is this a class such as English Composition 101, college algebra, that will easily transfer between private, public, Christian, secular universities? You also want to note the max credit amount for your target college or university and don't exceed it, or your child may lose their freshman status. So for example, my daughter is going to a school that only allows them to bring in 21 credits. After 21 credits, they are considered a transfer student and no longer eligible for freshman scholarships. Now, there's another state university that allows you to bring in as many dual enrollment classes as you want, credits, and you're still a freshman as long as it's your first year on campus. So vastly different policies between schools, and that's something you need to research. Then you need to note how the grades and credits transfer and count in GPA. Most schools, if you take, of course, if you take classes at the school, then they're going to count it in your child's credits and GPA at that school, as long as they go ahead and matriculate at the same school. But let's say that your child takes 5 classes or 15 credits and then wants to take those credits into applying to be a freshman at a different school. What often happens is that they will accept and count the credits, but they will not take the grades, the grade values, and incorporate it into a GPA because you didn't take that class at their school, and so you were assessed and given a grade by a professor that wasn't a professor at their school. So they may take your 15 credits, but you still start out at their school with a 0.00 GPA. So consider, and that's one of the reasons why dual enrollment programs can be such a good foot in the door for universities into your child's life, because they know if you've taken 15 or 21 credits with them, you don't want to lose a good GPA if that's what you've earned, and so you're more likely to matriculate at their school. So just keep that in mind. Now, I get asked a lot, is there homeschool bias in the college application process? Well, yes, it exists. I think we've already touched on that a little bit with the GPA versus the ACT or SAT test score. It happens. First thing is you want to award a diploma. You don't want to take the GED. So you want to be able to award a diploma for your child. A diploma just looks good to schools, to 2-year, 4-year trade schools, etc. And you also want to, I recommend that you present your transcripted essays in a format that is widely recognized. Now, many schools are taking the common application now, and then there's like a homeschool section or writer that you fill out if you're a homeschooled student. But you want to not have an 8-page long transcript and essays that aren't formatted the way the school prefers it to be formatted. So part of your research into that school is what kind of application process they have and how they like to see their transcripts. And it's a really good idea just to give their admissions office a call, speak with a counselor, and say, how can my child best position himself or herself to, when applying for your school? They love to help. Reference letters are important. They should not come from family members. And you want to consider the target school and program and speak their language, so to speak. So if you're applying to a school that is a music school, let's say a conservatory, then you want to present your portfolio and perhaps even videos of your work or your presentations, your recitals, etc., in the format that they are most familiar with. So again, this goes back to a good relationship with the admissions office, with perhaps a departmental representative there on campus, and then of course you can definitely visit the campus and speak to them and get an idea of what they're looking for in the application, and then especially what they're looking for when they are considering scholarship applications. Some schools have different essay questions for non-traditional students, and they call homeschooled students many times non-traditional. So I found a couple of examples from MIT. These are the questions that just a few years ago they were asking to homeschooled students. How and why did you come to be homeschooled? And what have you done with your time given your additional flexibility due to homeschooling? So just a couple of ideas there. All right, let's talk about the college visit process. I recommend you start planning visits no later than the 10th grade or grade 10 year. And the reason for that is if your child has, let's say, 4 to 6 schools that they're very interested in, you have to look at the dates when they're actually doing what I would call preview days or preview weekends. It's fine for you to make an appointment to go see the campus, but really the best taste of campus you're going to find is when there's a lot of students there, the school is in session, you can sit in on a class, you can talk to department representatives, you can attend info fairs. So that generally requires a 1 to 2 or more day commitment, and a lot of these weekends or 2-day commitments are at your own expense, at your own time. And so if your child's interested in 4 or 6 visits or 4 or 6 schools, and you need to space those out over several months, and then you really want to begin in 10th or 11th grade because you are going to be applying in the 12th grade. So I would suggest if you have 3 or less, or colleges 3 or fewer, then it's okay to start in grade 11 because you don't have that many. You have 2 or 3 to visit, but any more than that, you should probably start visiting a little bit earlier. I apologize for having some issues again with. I usually don't have issues with my computer, but it's a keynote presentation, so maybe it's using a lot of memory. Okay, you want to apply to school early in grade 12. Consider that most visits will be at your expense. Go to extended preview days, even if overnight, as I suggested, because of the reasons, being able to be on campus and really get an idea of the vibe on campus. Try to visit specific programs of interest and an information fair. Go to a panel where you can hear current students speak. This is amazingly revealing. We went to one panel where we heard students speak, and my daughter turned around and said, I do not want to go to this school. I was like, okay, because she was just very uncomfortable with some of the policies that they had regarding housing. And you will learn, you may not learn that in the application or just on a tour, but you'll learn it from students. And so that's very, very helpful. And then we've been to another school where a student panel really solidified her interest in a school. So very helpful. Go on the tour, pay particular attention to the dorm, the dining hall, and the program and study facilities. So for example, there's a school near here that has an amazing forensic science program, and I had taught chemistry, so I wanted to go in and look at their lab equipment, and it was phenomenal. And it's it's difficult to get into that program, and even more difficult to get to get a scholarship to that program. And so, but if you want to be a forensic scientist, it is a top-notch location. So it is really nice to be able to look at the facilities for the program your child might be interested in. Then you want to speak to dual enrollment, financial aid, and admissions counselors while you're there. Let them meet your child face-to-face and establish a rapport. But just from prior experience, I think you need to prepare your student with questions to ask them, because especially if they really want to go to the school or they really want a scholarship and they want to audition, let's say, for a scholarship at the school, and they're talking to the person that is the head of the department that makes the final decisions on scholarships, having that conversation, asking questions, it could be nerve-wracking. So help your student come up with some questions that he or she may want to ask before going, so that they feel comfortable asking. I think that will make a really good impression. And finally, this is the last slide. One thing that I would recommend doing as soon as you begin putting your name out to schools, as soon as your child takes the pre-SAT, the SAT, or the ACT, or any test like the AP, CLEP, etc., you need to establish a separate email address, separate from your personal email address, dedicated to all college correspondence. Because as soon as you submit your email address, you will receive dozens, and I'm not understating this, dozens of emails a day from schools that are interested in your student, especially when you take a standardized or national test like the ACT or SAT. There is a survey at the beginning that asks you what kind of school your child would be interested in, and they will send your email to those schools, and they will begin to reach out to your child. And my last piece of advice would be to document your initial impressions at every visit or after every conversation that you have with an admissions or other representative. Especially if your child is interested in multiple schools, it can get confusing who said that they accept a 529 plan, and who said that they accept a state lottery money, and who didn't. So make these notes as you go, as you're having these conversations, and note how your child is interacting with a particular school. And I think that that these kinds of notes will definitely be helpful when you have some questions and you go back and say, yes, I remember what we talked about that day, or I remember the answer to my financial aid question. So again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful. I should have said at the very beginning that a big disclaimer that, I've only had one child go to college. I've taught many that have pursued education beyond high school, and I've helped them with that process. I've written reference letters and looked at their applications, etc., and I've looked at their transcripts and helped them build them. But the truth is, I've only had one child, so I still believe that there is a lot more to learn about the application process, but I certainly hope that this has been helpful to you, and who knows, in 3 or 4 more years, they may come with a version number 2. So again, thank you for joining me.